Greetings, friends. Welcome to this week's edition of the MidWeek TuneUp, offered by Wesley United Methodist Church. Sometimes when getting a tune-up, it is determined that we need some spark plugs. Spark plugs work to ignite the fuel-air mixture in the combustion chamber in order to set the engine in motion so it might run smoothly and efficiently. Sometimes in our spiritual lives, we need a spark to help ignite our spiritual awareness. There are some verses of scripture that speak to this. Romans chapter 12, verse 11, the New International Version says, "Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord." Luke chapter 12, verse 35 says, in the same version, "Be dressed ready for service and keep your lamps burning." There's even an awareness that it is very possible for our attention in this busy world and our busy lives can get distracted from our spiritual life. Sometimes in a way that can cause us to be so engaged in living until maybe we're a little more out of touch with our standard of living in God's sight, where we may be slower to respond like we would like to respond, or quicker to react in a way that we might not like to react. Sometimes in this busyness, we can perhaps forget or fail to keep up our spiritual fervor and maybe end up like the 5 of the 10 bridesmaids. You know that story in the Gospel of Matthew, where 5 of them just did not remember or somehow prepare themselves to have enough oil. As they were waiting for the bridegroom to arrive. The bridegroom, of course, was delayed. They waited and waited. Finally, the groom got there, and it was time to go to the marriage feast, but the 5 had not brought their oil, and they did not have enough for their lamps. There were 5 others. They had their oil. They were ready when the bridegroom came. They ran in to the wedding feast. How the others scrambled to try to find some oil. The doors closed. They tried to rush, the 5 tried to rush to get there, but they were locked out because they were not ready to fulfill the need that they were called there to do. So what are some ways that we can keep our spiritual oil? What are some ways that we can maintain our spiritual fervor? How can we be assured that our spiritual spark is ablaze in the way that it needs to be? For some of us, we have worship, thank God. And when we can get there, we can come to worship and experience what we long for and commune with God and with others. It may be the liturgy or some reading in the liturgy. It perhaps could be some of the music, the hymns, the songs that are sung. Maybe perhaps it could be the experience of Holy Communion. But Jesus says, do this as often as we can to remember Him and what He did for us when He laid down His life for our salvation. Maybe it could be in worship, the fellowship, just to be with others who are trying to walk this walk with us and to be encouraged by them. That can be a spiritual uplift It is Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25 that does say, forsake not the assembling of the saints as some do, but encourage one another as the day approaches. How do we keep our spiritual sparks ignited? For some, perhaps it can't be in the public worship for various reasons, but thank God we can hear recorded versions of worship, live stream. Yes. And sometimes in these recorded versions of worship or online, it would be nice to be there, but the word still rings through and the message of God still becomes clear to us, which is what we hope these tune-up sessions can offer to you. Some of my most tear-jerking, highly spiritually strengthening moments have been maybe driving in my car on my way to or from some very difficult meeting. And it was my favorite song, streamed somehow through my media, that it spoke to my spirit and ministered to me and helped lift my burdens and prepare me for more living. Well, there are ways to ignite our spiritual fervor. It may be others besides the traditional worship version. The Olympic runner Eric Liddell, the Olympic runner and missionary who was featured in that movie, Chariots of Fire, he said, I believe God made me for a purpose, but God also made me fast. And when I run, I can feel God's pleasure. Jesus often went away in nature and went away to the mountains to pray. For some it's hiking. For some it's climbing mountains. That may or may not be our cup of tea. I haven't climbed many mountains in my lifetime, but never to rule out. Because even Moses climbed into the mountains and had a personal conversation multiple times with God. There are many ways that we can strengthen our spiritual fervor. There may be no other option but to go to the Lord in prayer. A member of a church I once served, she used to say at the end of every worship service, Pastor, yes, we just need to stay prayed up. Maybe that's all we have is to take it to the Lord in prayer. Well, the list of possibilities, possible ways we can keep our spiritual flame burning, maybe the list is long. But however it pleases, however we are able to maintain our spiritual fervor, may we experience it in the way that our burdens are not as heavy as they otherwise could be. May it help to keep the trials and tribulations of life from shocking us or tearing us asunder. May it help us in a way that the worries of this world don't wreak as much havoc in our lives. And may it keep us grounded and centered in a walk in a way that we know would be pleasing to God and encouraging to those around us. So saints, let's stay prayed up. Let's keep the spiritual fire burning. Let's keep a spark in our spiritual fervor. And let's keep walking on in faith and in courage in the Lord. Hope you have a wonderful and blessed week.